Part 5. As we prepared to cross the equator, the celebration cum sacrament began, and I, the comic victim, was trussed like Houdini and lifted by the yard, with hempen needles pricking at my wrists and ankles in tight knots. Blood pounded in my ears as I swept back and forth, laughing nervously, hair brushing the deck. My body had become the pendulum of a grandfather clock, and my head the bob. The men were dressed in gaudy costumes made from a combination of spare packing, odd tools, and a rotted junk box regalia, collected for just such a purpose. Sequined gowns with mange-like bald patches, scowling animal masks, chipped wooden fangs, and a decayed life jacket mounted with sailfish spines at each shoulder to serve as angels' wings. This motley band stood in a half-moon around me, singing, heckling and blessing me with splashes of beer and brine. Oh, Louis was the King of France before the Revolution. Away, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. Then he got his head chopped off, it spoiled his constitution. Away, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. The words were swallowed by the gray sky that wrapped the ship, incongruous with the defiantly chromatic spectacle around me. The clouds were a uniform bowl from horizon to horizon, whose milky diffusion made it difficult to discern even a rudimentary direction, let alone the hour. But Dylan assured us we were within a degree of the globe's vast belt, and as the waters were mostly flat, with only a coltish breeze to toss King Poseidon's robes, that is to say, the mold-mapped canvas tarp that spread across Leroy's drunken bulk, there would be no better time for the rite, of which I had become the suspended focus. And I was game. The seas the Beacon Hill would breach in the days to come were ever more fickle, I was told. And the truth of this ridiculous ceremony was that though the men were all of a modern mind, and didn't for a moment suppose that any ancient god's will was being gentled by such a performance, it served to settle something deeper in our hearts. For the waters of the world, even at their most becalmed, such as here in these doldrums between east and west, the old world and the new, are never truly still. The smallest ripple is but a tsunami in miniature, and every meter of the ocean is forever pregnant with that same unpredictable, mindless wrath. Yet, that unmerciful gulf is bested, century by century, by crew upon crew, within hull after hull, and that was the source of our faith. Mankind's own history was the God to whom we prayed, the sum of our innumerate selves, each hoping his best efforts would be met with approval from that measureless Father of whom we were just motes. And so Poseidon was given a fatherly face. It was through his will alone that sense could be wrung from the world, every man of us hauling together to bootstrap our collective destiny from the infinitude of random chance that was held in every drop of the sea. It's no surprise, then, that this ritual has been performed every day somewhere along this ring of the planet, for as long as sailors have known it to be a sphere hung in endless space. And in that sense, it was a practice more constant than Sunday Mass, made all the more dear to the hearts of men so desperate to lead, so desperate to be led. Thus Leroy perfectly embodied our moribund Poseidon, and Gorwind, who stared in mute judgment from beyond the glass of the wheelhouse, our Davy Jones. Baum notched the end of the boat hook against the gunwale, then wedged the rope in its fork to push me out over the waves. The men moaned in performative fear as I swung wildly, warning me of sharks and urging me to give their best to those they'd lost below, and not to take any hands of any fishy maids, no matter what salty promises they gave. Then, on a count, they loosed the line. I was encompassed in an instant. I had thought I was prepared. I wasn't so green to believe myself in true danger. I was in the hands of men whom I called friends, all more experienced than I. So even if something went amiss, I would be back aboard in as quick a turn, and any momentary fears would be quelled by laughter at our own folly. My only responsibility was to catch a deep breath before striking the surface, and that I did. Now I had dived off bridges of far greater height in my youth, so I was not immediately disoriented upon finding myself 2 fathoms below. And even though I had no formal instruction in swimming, I am a medical man, a student of the body, and I knew in normal circumstances one can trust the ancient instruction writ deep in our nervous systems to clench one's mouth, splay all limbs, kick, and dig upward toward the light. But to find oneself bound in such a position inspires the less logical but far more authoritative automation of panic. After only a moment of cold realization, I found my body possessed by a deeper self, one who asked no advice for its action and refused all countermand. I screamed, but my voice was transmuted instantly to an explosion of silver froth all around my spinning head, confusing me as I bent and snapped in the weightless space beneath the ship. Its black keel was the only thing I could make out with any certainty, and so I twisted to face it, bucking sharply, attempting to heave my head above the glittering surface, but that membrane was yet too far. The rope was still slack at my feet, and my mind blazed in blank terror as I traced its loose form, an umbilicus reaching upward into the world from which I had been jettisoned. And I saw the nightmare forms of the men above, broken as if in a kaleidoscope as they leaned over the deck, the sound of their jeers distant and distorted, their waving arms merging into others, animal faces warping and joining in undulate horror. I had no breath left to scream again. A greater fear overtook me. What if I had been gulled? What if I were not of this body of men as I thought, and the brotherliness and bond I had imagined growing between us all these last weeks was actually part of some greater performance? What if the sacrifice to Poseidon had a more urgent dimension for them, and I had, as I had for my father, become the vessel for all of their weaknesses, and somehow, in my destruction, they hoped to be purified? Raging, I struggled, but each kick only tightened my bonds and diminished my faith. In them, in myself, in my own survival. How could they have done this? What kind of monsters were they that they would find joy in my suffering? Why, God, I prayed. What had I done? Was this deserved? I beg you, forgive me, bring me back, pull me free, save your son. But no answer came, only more water. Sun warmed to the temperature of my own blood, filling my mouth, my sinuses, the porches of my ears, a demanding pressure from without and within. I shuddered until I finally hung limp, my body turning downward to face the inky black. I had only to release my hold, let go my resistance, and accept this excommunication. I was nothing, a cell shed free, worthless, cast out, an affront to the body. And it was then that I first saw the shape, the face, the great form that would define for me our condemned expedition and all my life to this very moment. You can see the ink on these pages has bled under my stilled nib, as even now I can't help but pause in fear as I remember when his vast countenance, outlined only dimly by the last sunken light of that horrible day, turned upward to meet my eyes, with a stone gaze of depthless brutality and profoundest judgment, before falling once again into the dark. A moment further, and my lungs gave way, the sea rushing to claim my body from within. Then the rope came taut, and I was swinging in the free air, coughing and wailing like a newborn, so thankful was I for the life that suddenly returned to my chest. Cut down, I fell to my knees, seawater burning in my throat as I heaved convulsively upon the deck, weak and gasping. But with their help, I stumbled to my feet as the men cheered, gathering all around to slap my soaked shoulders in loud congratulation. I was stunned to realize my view of them had righted itself so quickly, as they pulled their masks aside to reveal their true faces once again. smiling and laughing without the slightest guile. All anger and betrayal vanished from my mind, as I was welcomed among them once more. The seeming dream I suffered below receded in that embrace, and was further forgotten in the many offered cups of ale. Another keg was tapped, music struck up, and again they began to sing. Baum had retrieved a music box from his berth, and now, as he crushed and stretched that wheezing instrument, I could not help but sing with them. You call yourself a second mate, you cannot tie a bowline. Away, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. You cannot even stand up straight when the packet she is rolling. Away, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. By morning, the line was far behind us, and shipboard life returned to a comforting tedium. But now I found myself at the rail, looking down into the water, searching for a hint of that terrible face. All I could find, however, was my own, splintering and dividing from itself in the tormented surface of the new sea below the hill.